Hi everybody, welcome to Board on the Floor. Today we're going to try something a little different, and it's something I'm going to be calling Cardboard and Celluloid. And so for each of these games, I'm going to suggest 3 movies that you should take a look at. And since it is October, it's all going to be horror themed. And so all of these games are horror themed in their own way, where it's either horror fantasy, horror sci-fi, or just straightforward horror. All of these movies are easily available either to stream online. If you still have a video store in your neighborhood, maybe you'll be able to find some of them there. But they are pretty much easy enough to come by. In front of me, I have set up Unsettled, a cooperative space exploration game, more sci-fi, but there's a lot of horror elements in there because there's a lot of weird, gross things happening as you travel around outer space and settle on some of these planets and discover really weird things that are out there. Within the core game, it comes with 2 planets you can explore, and if you kickstarted it, there was the option of adding on 4 other planets, and I think recently there was a new Kickstarter with another 6 planets. So there's a lot of weird, scary, gross things out there and the different planets that are available for Unsettled. And since this is kind of an outer space sci-fi horror game, I thought movies that would go well with this, if you were going to do a pairing like a fine wine and a good meal, with Unsettled at the top of my list. Well, look, everyone will always probably mention Alien, so I'm not going to mention that one. And the first is a film called Pitch Black. Now, Pitch Black was the first in the Riddick trilogy, starring Vin Diesel. So there was Pitch Black, Chronicles of Riddick, and then Riddick. Pitch Black is more of a straightforward horror movie set in outer space. Whereas Chronicles of Riddick and Riddick go more into the kind of sci-fi fantasy area. But with Pitch Black, David Twohy created kind of a new sci-fi horror classic. People are trapped on a planet. There's kind of these weird bat-like creatures that only come out at night. So they got to figure out how to survive. And like most good horror movies, things get worse and worse for all of the characters involved. My next pick is a newer film. And as much as it doesn't take place in outer space, I feel like it has a similar vibe because it is about people trapped in kind of a station of sorts, but it takes place underwater, and it is called Underwater. It stars Kristen Stewart, and the movie literally starts off with a bang. Within the first few minutes, the action takes over and doesn't stop. It's pretty relentless. But it builds up to an ending that I really didn't see coming. And if you're into these types of horror board games, I think you'd really appreciate it. So even though it's not outer space, it's kind of like, I don't know if you would call it inner space, whatever. It's underwater. And that's my second pick. And my third pick is a classic film, a very important film when it comes to sci-fi and horror, because if it wasn't for this movie, we might not have films like Alien or Underwater or Pitch Black. And that film is called Planet of the Vampires. It's an Italian horror sci-fi film, directed by Mario Bava, and is hugely influential on Alien and all of the sequels, and a majority of sci-fi horror you've seen come out in the past 30 or 40 years. And as much as it's an older film and, is campy in its own right, it has a lot of cool stuff happening in it. And I wouldn't say that it's terrifying, but it's got a creepy thing going. And it has amazing style. And if you're interested in any of, Mario Bava's films, he's made really interesting films, very Hitchcockian films. He kind of started up the giallo genre, which is like the stuff that Dario Argento made, and a lot of the 70s horror films coming out of Italy. Mario Bava is kind of like the godfather of all that. Obviously, he made a lot of interesting horror films, but he also made some interesting science fiction films and fantasy films and stuff like that. So my 3 picks for Unsettled are Pitch Black, Underwater, and Planet of the Vampires. This is Tainted Grail. I've done a couple videos on this game before, which I'll link to up here. So if you're interested in seeing me play through the tutorial, there's a video about that. And Tainted Grail is more of a fantasy horror. Sorry if there's some glare coming off of these cards that are all sleeved, so they might be reflecting a bit much on the top. Fantasy horror, very dark world that you are exploring. Similar to Unsettled, you are traveling through this world and exploring different kind of map tiles that you flip over as you play through it. But in this one, each time you explore a map tile, there's possibly different story choices you will have to go through in the exploration journal. and it'll take you in a completely different direction. So there's a lot of replayability in this game and a lot of possibilities for failure. It is a real challenging game, and it is a game that requires a lot of dedication because even within the first campaign, The Fall of Avalon, there's, I think, 4 other ones that you could get. And there's a new Kickstarter happening right now called The King of Ruins, which is a standalone game, its own campaign. And I think a few more campaigns are available as add-ons in that Kickstarter campaign as well. And I'll link to it in the description below. But yeah, it's a 40-hour or more game for each campaign. So it takes a lot of commitment, but it's totally worth it. And for the films that I suggest, the first film is called The Headhunter. And this is an indie film that I think is only available on Shudder in North America. And it was made for very little money, but is extremely impressive in regards to its costume design and what they managed to pull off. And so it's got a very similar theme. And if you're really into Tainted Grail, then The Headhunter is going to be a movie that's right up your alley. And tonally and thematically, it pairs well with this game. So my next movie would be The Green Knight. Now, The Green Knight is more of a mainstream Hollywood film from the director of Pete's Dragon and Ghost Story. This version, it goes all out in regards to special effects. And even the cast is extremely impressive. If you're looking for a higher budget movie with some more recognizable stars, and thematically and tonally, this is what you're up for, The Green Knight would be a great choice. And for the next movie, I would say tonally, they are not alike whatsoever, but I guess subject-wise, you could understand why I would suggest this. But my third film will be Army of Darkness. Now, it is the third film in the Evil Dead trilogy, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Bruce Campbell. And as much as it's goofy and funny,
you know your shoelace is untied.
It does take place in a similar dark world as this. It's just a bit more lighthearted in its storytelling. But so for Tainted Grail, my 3 picks would be The Headhunter, The Green Knight, and Army of Darkness. And here we have Arkham Horror, the card game, a Lovecraftian investigation game going up against cultists, monsters, and all kinds of unknown horrors. Of course, if you're going to be playing something like Arkham Horror, looking for Lovecraft-themed horror movies is pretty easy enough. There are tons of them out there, a lot of mainstream ones as well. But I wanted to look for ones that were more kind of about like investigations or almost like exactly based on the same type of stories that Arkham Horror is inspired by. So my first pick is a film called The Resurrected. And The Resurrected stars Chris Sarandon, who you might know from Child's Play and Fright Night, and is directed by Dan O'Bannon. So Dan O'Bannon is the person who wrote Alien, the original Alien, and also directed such horror classics as Return of the Living Dead. The Resurrected is based on the case of Charles Dexter Ward. And so Charles Dexter Ward is a character you may encounter in Arkham Horror.
Oh, hi, Mark.
It's an older film, was one of those direct-to-video movies from, I think, the late 80s or early 90s. And it's easy enough to come by. It has been put out on Blu-ray and I believe DVD, and should be easy enough to stream. My next pick is From Beyond. It is a classic, gory, Lovecraft-inspired film directed by Stuart Gordon, who also did The Reanimator. But I think From Beyond is more thematically similar to Arkham Horror, the card game, and so that's why it was my pick as opposed to the other one. And From Beyond is about a character who discovers a way to kind of break the fabric between our realm and a realm full of gross, sticky monsters.
Humans are such easy prey.
And for my third pick, I'm going to a classic, The Dunwich Horror. It is one of those old MGM horror films, and at the time they had made quite a few movies that were either inspired by Lovecraft stories or Edgar Allan Poe. And The Dunwich Horror stars Dean Stockwell from Quantum Leap. You may know him as Al, the hologram. It is directly inspired by the short story and has very similar elements to some of the campaigns that you will play in the Arkham Horror card game, such as the Dunwich Legacy. And so the Dunwich Horror an older movie, but still offers some pretty interesting stuff in regards to like Lovecraft and on film type thing. My 3 picks for Arkham Horror the card game are The Resurrected, From Beyond, and The Dunwich Horror. Here we have Terra. I've also done a video playthrough of this, so check out the link up there. And Terra is a horrific spelunking board game. So you're trapped in a cave, you got to make your way out, and you play 4 characters. If you're playing solo, you have to play 4 characters. If you're playing with more people, then the minimum is still 4, so you have to divide it however you want to divide it. And it often plays out that someone isn't going to survive. If you're looking for a good pairing with a horror movie, there's quite a few kind of cave diving horror films out there. But my 3 picks would include, first and foremost, The Descent. So The Descent is probably the best cave diving horror film you will ever see. It scared the crap out of me when I first saw it, and I loved every minute of it. And it's directed by a guy named Neil Marshall, who you may also know from Game of Thrones. He directed a lot of the classic episodes from the first original series of Game of Thrones. And so The Descent is about a group of women who go cave diving in an unexplored cave and encounter some things down there that they didn't expect. It's claustrophobic, it is really uncomfortable, and it has a lot of human drama in it too that just elevates it to a whole other level. So The Descent, top pick. The next isn't really a horror film, more of an action film, but it had me on edge throughout the entire movie. And so I think it's a good pick, and it's called Sanctum. It's a film that was produced by James Cameron. And if you're a fan of James Cameron, you know he likes to kind of push the envelope when it comes to the actual filmmaking. And Sanctum really feels like you are stuck underground with those cavers. And like I said, even though it's not really horror, I think it has horror kind of hidden away at its core, because there are some moments in it that were extremely tense, creepy, uncomfortable. So Sanctum would be my second pick. And my third pick is a found footage film, and it's not really about cave diving as much as it is exploring the underneath of a city. And the film is called As Above, So Below. So it is a found footage movie about people exploring the underground of Paris. But it has some really weird stuff going on, and when it comes to found footage movies, is probably one of the best ones I've ever watched. With Terra, the 3 movies I picked were The Descent, Sanctum, and As Above, So Below. Seems like board games really have been mining Lovecraft as much as possible when it comes to horror-themed board games. And in my opinion, the best of the bunch is Cthulhu Death May Die. This has all of the elements that I love about board gaming, and if you're a fan of Lovecraft, it also has that kind of like, well, I don't want to say playfulness, because Lovecraft isn't very playful, but that kind of classic vibe that goes along with a lot of those stories in regards to like investigations, archaeology, weird monsters, like strange groups of people, cultists, stuff like that. Cthulhu Death May Die has it all. So similar with how I found 3 films for Arkham Horror, I wanted to go with a specific type of Lovecraft film. So the ones that more revolve around, groups of people, cults, and possibly one big baddie. Now, my first pick is actually a Canadian horror film made from some people I know called The Void. Now, if you are a fan of dark, gory films, The Void is right up your alley. The Void is a newer film that is heavily inspired by Lovecraft and is about a group of people trying to survive as the cult of the Void kind of surround them and trap them inside this hospital. And of course, there's tons of gore, lots of tentacles and slime. It really does have a lot of the elements in place that I would even say feels almost identical to an episode you'd be playing in Cthulhu Death May Die. So my first pick is The Void. My second pick was one of my favorite films growing up. I had gone to see it in the theater multiple times, and it is John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness. It is about an insurance investigator who is trying to figure out whether or not a publishing company has faked the death of one of their most famous authors. And of course, he is the author of tons of horror novels that kind of have a cult following. And as you would expect in anything inspired by Lovecraft, a lot of weird things start to happen. tentacles and gore and slime abound in John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness. And my third pick is going to be Dagon, which is directed by Stuart Gordon, who also did From Beyond and Reanimator. And Dagon, I think, is more thematically, related to Cthulhu Death May Die than I would say Arkham Horror. It's about a man who kind of washes up on shore in this strange village and uncovers that they are a cult that worship the elder god Dagon. And there are fish people and deep ones and all kinds of stuff like that. I think it pairs really well with this game. So my 3 picks for Cthulhu Death May Die are The Void, In the Mouth of Madness, and Dagon. So there you have a whole bunch of horror films you could be checking out in the upcoming weeks as we get closer and closer to Halloween. But feel free to, let it spread into November and December. You don't just have to watch horror films in October. But if you do check any of these out, let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you have any questions, you can stick them down there too. And I'll do my best to source out some of the trailers and give as much more information as I can in the description below. So thanks a lot for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed yourself, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy.